Go ahead. Tell
It's
everybody
not
where you're
built
at.
right. Let me just introduce myself. That's fine. That'll work just as well.
I think next time I'm
Um,
going to do that. I'm just going to do
okay.
that.
I am at Berea College, which is in Kentucky, and I'm a professor of African and African American Studies at Berea College. I had been associate, but I was recently promoted to full professor. So, of African and African American Studies at Berea College. And I also teach courses across disciplines. So, I also teach courses in history and also in general studies, as well as in psychology.
Wow. Okay. Those are heavy hitting topics, to be honest with you. Psychology itself is pretty strong. History.
Well, those are the areas that I recognize were the most important for understanding both myself and the world around me.
Yes, our philosophy is what actually manifests our reality when we're looking through the lens in which we see the world, and it really enhances, especially when you can explain it, because
Yes.
original thought is not very easy to come by in and of itself, and then to be able to explain yourself once you truly believe it, because people, I don't think people realize this. A lot of people's not philosophy, but belief system is far shallower than they realize. And it only takes a couple papers to skew your original thought. You think this, but I'd like you to write about this. And all of a sudden, you can actually change your own mind because that belief isn't as in depth as you thought it was.
Well, my my uncle used to remind me often. He would say there are three levels of, if you will, awareness or intellect or understanding. And he said the first is belief, the second is thought, and the third is knowledge. Knowledge is when you're now a part of something. I can believe that a particular uh, type of food or a dish tastes good because somebody told me that it's tastes good and they had it at the restaurant. I I only know it when I've actually tasted it, when I've actually engaged it. So yeah, this idea of being able to ground yourself in um, something more than just belief or thought, right, is something that's always been important for me.
I think it's important for everybody, and it should never be downplayed. Thinking itself is extremely difficult, and the colleges have such a huge importance. And their thought, it comes out not just in the way we speak, but
Mm-hmm.
it comes out in the way we write. And if you can't organize your thoughts properly, you're not going to be able to write properly. You're not going to be able to argue
Yeah.
your viewpoint properly, and
Mm-hmm.
it's no small task to do what you do. So on that note, the premise of my show, uh, Jose, is I would love to hear how you got to the place where you said, I want my doctorate's degree, I want to be a professor, I want to be in college, I want to teach young minds. How does that happen?
It happened, Regan, largely because I came up in a family that put an emphasis on education, even though my father hadn't even finished um, high school. But my mother's family had been fairly well educated, although no one had a doctorate. But I came from a family environment that talked about the importance of education. So that was, first. And I came from a community which also put an emphasis on education. And this is, Long Island, New York. And the combination of having that nurturing environment in terms of what's going on in the family, um, uh, coupled with an uncle who was really uh, very astute in assessing social phenomena, economic, political, historical. And he often told me, the biggest problem that most communities face, and when you look at a certain lack of self confidence or self awareness, is not knowing who they are. not knowing the history of a given community. And the big thing he would talk about is he said, given that so many Black people only see the history of Black people rooted in slavery or rooted in Jim Crow segregation or victimization, means that that particular community is going to wrestle with this idea of its worth and its identity. Now, slavery existed. Slavery is a part of human history, but the fact that um, most people in our educational system, for me coming up, of course, at the end of the 20th century and into the 21st century, most of the education that people received did not talk about the contributions of African people or Black people beyond, again, oppressive conditions, whether it be under enslavement or whether it be colonialism or colonization in terms of on the continent of Africa. Um, and that meant that people's perspective or worldview was very narrow and very limited. And I realized that even though I initially wanted to go to school for medicine, I had said I wanted to be a doctor, and I started out as a biology major, and then I segued into history, for my undergraduate, because I basically said I think more people are suffering from emotional and, if you will, psychological challenges than they are physical challenges. Now, I know psychiatry, of course, looks at both of those because a psychiatrist is a physician, but I still felt that education or the lack of a good education was contributing to most of the social ills that I was witnessing growing up. The college that I'm at, for example, Regan, Carter G. Woodson, who was the father of what initially was so-called Black History Week or Negro History Week, would then become Black History Month, decades later. But Carter G. Woodson is a graduate of Berea College, who was from West Virginia, or what's now West Virginia, who went on to Harvard and then went on to the University of Chicago, earned his doctorate in history, um, and wrote a prominent book that I recommend for people to understand essentially this idea of the relationship between historical knowledge and education or even miseducation. And the name of his book is called The Miseducation of the Negro. And even though Regan, it was written in the 1930s, I think its first publication was 1933, this book still had relevance to me that spoke to me in the 1980s, right? That because I was saying, if you don't know anything beyond the limited um, perspective of a given educational system or a particular family experience, then that means that um, the breadth of your knowledge of self and the world is going to be very narrow. It's like somebody growing up in a very, very small town someplace and never going outside and hearing or seeing anything else and having a very limited understanding of what life is.
Oh
And
yeah,
if you
that nativity can actually hinder you in all kinds of aspects because now you got to reevaluate. Am I
absolutely
am I yeah
yeah
am I that vulnerable? Can
right
I can other people take advantage of me because I don't understand half of what I thought I did?
right
And that changes your perspective tremendously, and you
it
got to
can
play this huge catch up game overnight.
mhm, right, and it can lead to either self-hatred. It can lead to hatred of others in general, which is not helpful either, right? Because the idea of then seeing the world as, literally in black and white, right?
Yeah, right.
Where all good or all bad, and not recognizing that there's there's a great deal of gray that's out there. But
Well,
we're also, we're also inheriting, like, right, a lot of the past perspectives. And unless we evaluate them for ourselves, we can just perpetuate the same stuff that went 100, or more years ago.
yeah, and I'll be honest with you. I've come to a conclusion that we mirror each other more than we realize. I think that's one of the reasons why we self hate or we hate others or we have sympathy for others or
Hmm.
we'll have disdain for others is because we see ourselves in those people. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
And I'm not saying different cultures don't have a different flavor, but there's obviously a common denominator. And I don't want to bring in God or anything of that nature, but in general, we do have a respect for humanity in and of itself, as if it has a divine value.
Oh, we should.
Oh,
Yeah,
no,
we
we
should.
have to. We have to.
Yeah,
Otherwise, why are the old people in those nursing homes?
yeah,
Do you know what I'm saying? There's a
I
reason
do.
why we do what we do and we treat each other the way, or we should treat each other the
Oh,
way
we
we
should.
should.
I'm going to keep coming back to that because there are many people who don't. But you're correct. I know you said you want to bring God into it, but again, in just in terms of the school here, the founder of the school was an abolitionist who, in the 1850s, came from a family of slave owners, but he was a Christian, and he basically said um, chattel slavery didn't make any sense. Because if we're recognizing that of one blood God made all the peoples of the earth, and so he's basically quoting from Acts in the Bible, um, of one blood God made all the peoples of the earth. Why would you create an environment that dehumanized a group to the extent that they are now counted as cattle? That's why the term chattel is employed in the law. Chattel slavery, or to be likened unto cattle. But what you said, Regan, about this idea of why do we take care of our elders? Why is there this concern about people who are sick or in
And the
need?
dignity of those people.
Right. And they still have dignity, even though they may not, have all their faculties, or are elderly and can't contribute in the same ways that they had when they were younger women or younger men. But I would say what you said, didn't you? I think you used the word a kind of divine spark. There's a divine spark. There's a divine aspect. And again, I know we're speaking um, theologically or religiously, but basically that's part of the tradition from which I come as well. I do believe there's a divine spark or a Holy Spirit or a holy breath or a ka or a ba, however, whatever term one wants to use, that does have um, a higher self purpose, meaning it isn't simply about doing only for self, being self absorbed, and not being concerned about um, other people and the needs and respect for other people.
Even
Yeah.
even if you are selfish, you are technically a community unto yourself. If you think you could take advantage of me and the future Jose will not pay for it, do you know what I'm saying? So you got to think
Yeah.
of the Jose of the future and the Jose of the past and the Jose of tomorrow and next year. So that you technically are a community unto yourself. Even if you're selfish, it's in your best interest to have some reciprocity, at least in the manner of which you would think, okay, I want him to be able to take care of me later if I'm not in such a
Mhm.
great situation tomorrow.
Although I see, but what you just said, a community of yourself, but are you? You're a community of yourself, but you're always interdependent and interconnected with others.
I don't think there's a difference if you think about it.
Well,
When you take well, my point though is when you take care of yourself properly,
mhm,
everybody around you should get a ripple effect of that positive. You tell the truth, you work hard, you do all the things you're supposed
right.
to do. Everybody around you
Yeah.
that counts on you should also, because like I said from the beginning, we're mimicking machines. The reason why
Mm,
trends exist is because we kind of mirror each other and we copy each other, and
mm.
I think we're way more connected than we realize.
Well, yeah, that's the idea of inter. In my day, we used to talk about interconnections or the interconnectedness. The term that is often used now, although it's often used differently depending upon who's using it. Intersectionality, right? the intersections of all kinds of phenomena. We used to say in my day, the interconnection and the interdependence of all things. In the traditional Akan society, and that's Akan, the Akan of Ghana, there's a reference to the Anansi, the spider. And they say that basically the universe, or I would even say the multiverse or the pluriverse, is like a gigantic spider web. And if you touch any part of the web, the whole web shakes. The recognition that there is that level of interconnection means that a thinking and conscious man or woman is doing what you said earlier. They're saying, I'm not going to do Regan wrong, because if I do you wrong in some way that I certainly know is wrong, there are ramifications on that proverbial spider web, in reference to, like I said, Anansi in the Akan tradition of Ghana. So the idea of, do unto others as you would have others do unto you, is no different than the concept of karma in Buddhism,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah. There's an interconnection in a lot of these religions
That's
also.
that's right. That's right.
And on that note, you said what was it? That last thing you said there, do unto others. There's been studies where people don't take care of themselves as well as they would actually take care of their pets. So here's a wild phenomena. We want each other to take care of each other as well as we would take care of ourselves. But in
Mm-hmm.
reality, they did a study. If I was to go to the doctor and get a prescription for medicine, the probability of me filling it out, I think, is only like 50%. Now, if I do fill it out and I take it home, there's a 25% chance I will not administer it to myself properly. Think about
That's
it.
interesting.
Now here's the wild part. You do the same thing for your cat or dog, and you go to the vet and you go get the medicine.
Mm.
90 something percent of the people will get the medication, fill out the prescription, and give that medication properly to its full extent to that animal. Why would you
Yeah.
treat the animal better than you treat yourself? The animal likes you. He likes you enough to keep you around so you feed him. But yet we're self-deprecating and a more deeper
Yeah.
level than we realize. And I
Right.
think that's why sometimes like a victim mentality can eat away at your soul, even if you
Mm-hmm.
have all the other things all worked out for you and
Right.
you try to well round yourself. If that core is still, I don't want to call it rotten. What would you call it? It's kind of like
It's just undeveloped.
undeveloped would be a good word. Okay, there's a good word because there's always the potential for redemption. No matter
That's
how
right.
many mistakes you make, no matter how many times you fall, you're stronger than your circumstances and you can overcome it. And I think that's one of the principles of the purpose of life is
Right.
we're
Well,
built for a struggle. A human
which
body, the human mind was built for a struggle, and
Mhm.
we're designed to overcome it to the point where we normally make it too comfortable and we have to recycle all the way back to the beginning again. And we've seen in history over and over again strong men, weak times, strong men, and all that
Mhm.
verbiage that people use to describe how we reciprocal nature of our society, just humanity just keeps going, and it's not linear. Christianity likes to go linear, and some other religions like to do it in a more cycled. I think we're more. It's a little bit of both. I think it's a little bit of
Mhm.
both, but there's a lot of cycles. You could see the cycles.
No, I would agree that that's one of the challenges for many people is we don't recognize that really life or existence is cyclical. There's a cycle. And again, that there is an interconnection and an interdependence. And when people are cut off from recognizing that they have a direct impact on others and others have a direct impact on them, depending on the degree to which is dependent upon the nature of the relationship. But ancient societies, even indigenous societies of the present, tend to think more in terms of this interconnection and interdependence. And I think the biggest threat to our present existence now. I mean, we're facing some real existential threats because this is just my opinion. Certain groups or certain leaders or certain nations certain people in positions of power appear to have lost the awareness that there is an interconnection and interdependence, and think that somehow you can do something to someone else, or to another uh, nation or group or what have you, and not have that, if it's unjust, come back on you. That there's always going to be that uh, karma. There's that karma. You said you had a good friend of yours who was Haitian, and of course, I don't know, what his religious or spiritual beliefs were, but of course, Haiti has the tradition of Vodun or voodoo, which is no different than most other spiritual traditions that are indigenous, be it in Africa, be it in Asia, be it in Europe, be it in the Americas, that there is this karmic connection. The tendency is to always see it only in the context of something evil or negative. I often tell people, it depends upon how something is being used. Think of all the good intended Christians or good intended Muslims who did things which are incredibly destructive, but they did it in the name of their religion and believed that it was something good, when in fact it was something that was destructive. So you can use, something for good or evil, which again is why this need for self-reflection, this need for asking yourself daily, am I being the best person, the best soul that I can be at this time? How can I become better? And then so, what do you mean? What does it mean to be better? To me, I always just think of again, in my own tradition in Moorish science, which is a form of Sufism or a Marabout tradition in North and West Africa. This idea of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice being the criteria for me. That's my creed. So when I think of how I'm engaging someone, how I'm having a conversation or writing or anything, am I doing this using those five tenets, those five principles? And love is always first. So, love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. I can't get to justice until I've gone through love and truth first, right? There always has to, and what I mean by that is I always have to be thinking in terms of um, compassion, empathy, sensitivity to others. Ultimately, we all want justice, but we can't have true justice until the first four things have been addressed: love and truth, an interest in peace, a respect for freedom, and then last and not least, but of course, justice.
Yeah, and I've heard someone say before, because I agree with you a lot on this, that if love is one of your tenets, then telling the truth would be the means by which, or the catalyst by which you would get love out there, right? I can't
Yes,
love you unless I'm honest with you.
that's
Yes.
right.
And if I truly believe that, if I have faith that love is a major tenet in life, if it's one of the main values of life, and that telling the truth, the only way I can prove that faith is to act it out. I have to act it out. I can't do a math equation to get that to be true, but I can act it out and make it true. So you have to have faith to make
Yes.
some of these tenets actually work. So it's something. There's so much more to us than we realize. It's unbelievable, to be honest with you. I see it more. I got 6 kids. I think I told you that, and it seems like you vicariously lived through them, and I think that's why there's so much frustration when they make a mistake, because it's like, I already did that. You shouldn't do that. I already told you how this plays out. You should not have to relive this again. And and I've been reading, so I try to read so I can avoid some of the other pit traps, because there's people that have,
Yes.
and there's so much out there.
Hey, you remind me, my uncle, again, he was a major mentor for me, but he always used to say, and he's quoting something coming out of Moorish tradition. He said, "Man knows not by being told." And what that means is you can tell your children or tell someone that, is family, friends, a loved one, look, I walked down this road. this road, or drove down this road, there are potholes, don't go, avoid it. And they do it anyway. And he said, didn't I tell you not to take that street? Well, I know you told me. Yeah, the only way they know is once they do it themselves, right?
Yeah.
Now, certain people, and this is the beauty of it, right? Because we're different. That people are different in terms of our individual persona, and what we think we're here to do in terms of our being in this world, coming into the world. Some of us as souls, I would say, are more attuned to paying more attention to the wisdom of elders. So if somebody who's an elder says, now you shouldn't drive down that road, you really take to heart what that person says and said, I'm not going to repeat that same mistake. Or family members who, um, got drug addicted, or family members who, made other bad choices in life. And you're like, oh, didn't I tell you? Didn't your mother? Didn't your grandfather? Whomever. So, well, yeah, but it didn't sink in. It wasn't meant for them to have it sink in for whatever reason. They were meant to have experience driving down that road for themselves. And this is where, again, this idea that, no no finite mind can comprehend things infinite. That is very humbling, but it's also very, very real, right? This idea that I know the limitations. As long as I know the limitations of my knowledge, I know that my knowledge can always expand because I know the limitations of it, and I'm always willing to pursue greater experience and knowledge so that I can then build that up and say, okay, I have a lot more to draw from in assessing, this world.
Absolutely. And pursuing something in and of itself brings more to light. So sometimes learning the hard way means that not only did you learn the lesson I was trying to tell you, but you may learn 3 lessons that were even more valuable than the first. And you don't even know, and the same thing with pursuing a passion or trying a hobby or whatever it be, or doing a sport. As you get better at things, for instance, the first time if you work for a pizza place, the first time you fold the box, it takes like 30 seconds. After like 7 or 8 days, there's zero thought involved. It's become muscle memory, and it's 3.5 seconds. You've already pushed aside any of the mental necessity to think at all, and it becomes like a motor. And now you can do it 10 times faster. But as you do that with things in life, you expand. It's almost as if you physically grow as a person, as you conquer a new challenge, as you become more knowledgeable in something that wasn't the original pursuit. Because as I do this, I've learned how to edit things. I've learned I've learned so many things I had no intention of learning. I still need to learn, and it all matters. Because what if there's something later on that I'm supposed to learn that I wouldn't be able to even begin if the doors that were opened weren't already opened, or the knowledge base wasn't there, or something that's motor memory now. Because you can give up if there's like 10 things that you need to learn to get to that one thing. You may be like, not worth it. But if you got 4 of them already, now you can see a daunting task as something that's relevantly worth the fight.
Yes.
So, there's so many aspects to that.
I would say that's why we're here. We're here to learn. The purpose, is what's the French saying? The raison d'être, the reason for being. The reason for what's your reason for being? Or in the famous Matrix movie, purpose, Mr. Anderson, purpose. What is our reason for being? What's our and some people would say, well, there is no reason.
That's a mistake.
There's the classic, which I would say is definitely a mistake, because that's not what the larger message is of all these ancient civilizations and cultures that achieve quite a bit, and the valuable lessons that we can learn by looking at different cultures. The overwhelming message is not that there is no purpose. The larger message is, what is your purpose, right? the idea of finding out what your purpose. Every person has a purpose. There's a reason for being here, and I think that kind of nihilistic cop out view, that's how I see it, can cause as many problems as people who would say that there is no purpose would say about saying there is a purpose. So someone says, my purpose is to go out and spread the gospel. And then some people who are non-religious would say, well, that's the problem. You're trying to force your faith on other people. Well, now you have to figure out, or gauge, so to speak, where that person is at. How are they spreading it? And in the process of spreading their faith, are they leaving the world better? Right? Are they, and I mean, are they being more loving?
Well, not only that, but you don't want to judge them on their passion, because you don't pick your passions. Your passions pick you.
Yeah,
You
that
know what
goes
I'm
back
saying?
to that's
Yeah.
the whole idea of your purpose, finding that purpose, right? What's in you,
And if
right?
you don't do that, if you're nihilistic and you don't look to take on a burden, you leave the world a smaller place.
Yes,
You were here for a reason. I truly believe that you're here for a reason. You're supposed to find your purpose. You're supposed to figure out what your passions are and at least follow them. And I recommend not more than 2 years. You don't want to go down a rabbit hole that wasn't meant to be yours just because you like something. I like basketball. That was never going to work out for me. And if I would have dumped 20 years into that, that would have been a waste of 19 and a half years.
mm-hmm.
So I normally recommend 2 years. If you have a passion, go for it. 2 years is not too long. You should learn something. If not, you never learn nothing. You should learn something and
Right.
move on. If it didn't work out,
Right.
now it's a hobby, not a passion anymore, and you need to find a new target to aim at. But I couldn't
Yeah.
imagine a man or a woman that doesn't have a target to aim at. That sounds like a miserable place, a real miserable place.
Yeah.
And I think one of the best religious ways of wording it, going back again to the religion, I hate doing it, but it seems to have overlapping value to why we do what we do. And when you hear someone say, pick up your cross and bear it, the key to that premise is to do it voluntarily. So not only should you have like a goal or a purpose, because you get someone in prison or whatever and they don't do drugs anymore, and then you have someone that chooses not to do drugs anymore, the outcomes are far, far vastly different. Choosing to suffer a little bit for the greater good, like waiting a week for your paycheck, which someone on drugs has a really hard time doing, and people don't realize that one of the biggest reasons why these people go back to it isn't because they want to be high all the time. It's because they can't get out of the hustle. They can't get out of that mindset of, I got to go make another $40 real quick. They cannot hold back the pleasure for 7 days to wait for a paycheck. They just don't have it in them. Their instant gratification has been so hardwired. It's a miserable
Yeah,
thing.
and
It's a whole,
it even goes beyond just those who are, say, suffering with drug addiction. I mean, so much of Madison Avenue and the way that even software is developed is to keep you coming back, for more, more. I mean, video games are designed that way. So, okay.
we were talking about. I was going to end with dopamine rushes and everything, but you were talking about video games, software. Go ahead. You're trying to
Yeah,
explain
just
how.
saying that video games and software in general, in terms of our phone, even I'm forgetting their name now, but there was
Social media like Instagram,
yeah, all of that
TikTok.
is right. There was a uh, computer scientist a couple of years ago, and I think she worked for Facebook at one time, but she was talking about this idea of, again, having people constantly feel addicted to the software, to the app, to the game, and making us addictive, developing addictive behaviors that prevent us from being able to get as much done as we would like, or, the what I call weapons of mass distraction, to keep us from doing things which are actually more conducive to our personal growth. So, yeah, and this goes again back to this idea as to, what is our purpose? Why are
It
we
robs us. It robs us of our purpose.
exactly? Because if you're constantly distracted from doing things that are not really benefiting, um, anyone. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I don't have a problem with somebody taking time to sit down and play a video game or watch a sports event or to play, something on their phone. But if it reaches the point where that becomes your primary focal points for every day is going through those things, and you're not achieving other things, getting other things done, or doing things like trying to stay in shape, for example. I mean, as a father of six children, you may have had the experience comparing when you were a kid, and you would go out and you would play. I know I did. We wanted to get outside and play and get fresh air and go, to the park or just run and everything around.
It was an expectation after doing your homework.
Exactly. And if you then create a group of young people who are content to sit for 5 and 6 hours in front of a screen doing this and not getting out and getting the exercise and fresh air that's needed, we shouldn't be surprised that both a problem with really the ability to have, I would say, healthy social relationships and interaction, the ability to communicate with others, as well as we shouldn't be surprised to see an increase in health issues, health problems, obesity, and high blood pressure,
And those things are killers.
diabetes.
Those things are
Right.
killers.
And these things are never
Ah,
going after. It was not seen among children the way that it's being seen now in the last 15, 20 years.
yeah.
So I have a question for you, Regan. What was it? I meant to, I think I may have asked this before, but what was it that made you think that I, of all people, would have something of value to share?
Well, number one, I truly believe this, and I don't mean this as just a word, but I mean this in action. I believe everybody has something of value.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to young ladies that other people probably wouldn't have bothered, and I've got great responses from them. And I've gone as high as I could, way beyond what I should have, because you never know when someone's an open-minded person. Some people learn certain ways, and some people learn other ways. Some people are far more open to certain ideas than others. And I took a chance, and I'll be honest with you. Once you said yes, I said I'm going to wait and let him be a test subject before I really push out the idea of talking to people in college too much, because I didn't know how it would play out. A lot of the guys I've talked to are content creators, so my goal was I want to get my finger wet in as broad a spectrum of things I can, and I'm interested in what makes.
But how did my name come up? I guess, I mean, me of all
Okay. So I have to explain to you how I do what I do. So this is episode 66 in 3 months. So I'm really doing a lot. What I do is I mass blanket a particular group of people because I know I'm going to get 100 no's before I get a maybe.
Gotcha.
And it takes 20 maybes to get a yes. So when I talk to a lot of people, it's not that I said, wow, you're the most amazing human being I've ever met in my life. To say you're not. You are pretty amazing. And I'm not going to lie to you. So glad we met. But I had to reach a big group of people and see what the net picked up.
Gotcha.
So and from there, I said, okay, African Studies is one of those ones that's a unique. I like seeing the outskirts of norm. Not to say that, do you understand what I'm saying? For you to land there means that you took a very unique path to get there.
Absolutely.
Or you just dropped out of the air and landed on it by accident.
Mm-hmm.
Either one, the story had to be pretty amazing. So I said, this is the guy. This is a good one. This should be worth my time. And I think it's just intuition and past knowledge and how I've interacted with other
Well,
people
no,
before.
that's helpful. Then that makes sense now.
Okay.
Okay, that
And
makes sense.
I thought I tried to explain that when you asked the first time.
You did, but you explained it much better this time.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the way you describe things in a text message versus how you do it in person, well,
Right.
or over a
Well,
Zoom is a little
exactly right.
different.
In the emails. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, no, that makes sense. And look, I've had people ask me, um, uh, the same thing. Of course, folks who are both within the academy and outside the academy. It's like, for someone who, you could have been a physician, or you could have been a lawyer. Why did you opt to go into higher education? And I explained, just as I explained earlier, because I see the importance of self knowledge. Know thyself. The ancient Egyptians said it, the ancient Greeks said it, the ancient Romans said it. Know thyself, right? And so many traditions in various cultures, Asia, whether it's India, China, Japan, it doesn't make any difference, right? On and on and on. But the realization that most people don't know much about the contributions or the legacy of African people, that the image, I often say, it isn't that Africans don't have a great history. It's that the greatness of Africa's history is often not part of the mainstream media. That's not what we're getting, whether, and I don't just mean media in the sense of, like popular media and news. I'm speaking more figuratively, just even in terms of the academy. So I'll give an example. When I tell people that the patron saint of Germany was an African, that should make some people ask the question, wait a minute, wait a minute, what do you mean the patron saint of Germany? Yes, the patron saint in terms of and I'm not Catholic, but my father was Catholic. But in the context of Roman Catholicism, one of the patron saints of the Germanic people is someone known as Saint Maurice or Saint Moritz, who was part of the hagiography, which is the biography of saints in the context of Roman Catholicism, Roman Catholic history. This is someone who, in the first, second century of the Common Era, basically was a martyr for a Germanic tribe known as the Swabians or the Suevi. As a Christian, he refused to kill these Germans who were Christian, and because the Roman legion required discipline, he was killed, and every 10th man in his army, in his army, a regiment was killed. They were decimated. That automatically begins to change how people look at the world. So this person was quote unquote black, or this was an African? Yeah, this was an African. And the image of Saint Maurice or Saint Moritz can be found all over the place. Now, although there are some images that have tried to present him as looking European, it doesn't match his name, because Moritz or Maurice literally is a reference to being African. Just like the name Mauritania, just like the name Morocco. Morocco being the name of a country, Mauritania, again, it's a reference to darkness of complexion and or someone being of African ancestry.
Yeah, wasn't Moors like a group of Africans?
Yes, the Moors,
Yeah.
Historically the Moors, or in Spanish, Moros, the Moors represent a predominantly African Muslim community.
Yeah. Yeah, they're
That
the ones that
entered
almost came to France. They almost made it to France, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They made it as far as Toulouse. Charles Martel, Charles the Hammer Martel, as he's called, stopped this invasion of African Muslim and Asiatic or Middle Eastern, quote unquote, Muslim populations that were coming up into Europe, and bringing what we now know as the foundations for the university system. See, so that's the other part of, like you said, why I do what I do. The more that I studied the history, the more I saw that there was this strong connection outside of the Western world to both Africa and Asia, and to obviously the religion of Islam as well, and the religion of Judaism that would influence Muslims and Jews, would influence the rise of the academic institutions that will become known then as the university system. So if one looks at the foundations, for example, of Oxford University, and then you find out that someone named Daniel Morley went and studied among the Moors in the Iberian Peninsula, in Andalusia or modern day Spain, brought books back with him, went back to England, and shortly after him returning, Oxford University would start to take off as a major institution of learning in the English speaking world. These are things that are known by intellectual historians. The problem is, very often people don't make the connection between the African world, where the Moors are coming from, and the European world that will be the primary beneficiaries of this ancient and medieval era knowledge that finds its way into Europe. And then European intellectuals will advance the knowledge. That's what happens in societies, right? But to ignore or to deny the influence and the foundational information and everything from, like I said, ancient knowledge being preserved from the Greeks, ancient knowledge being preserved from ancient Kemet or Egypt, the ancient knowledge of Persia, India, China, that is all going to come together during this period of the Islamic era under the Moors, who will then spread this information into Europe.
Yeah.
And that will then become the foundation for the university system.
Yeah.
Because prior to that, the university system was largely rooted in basically just learning the foundations of being a good Catholic. Because of course, in the Western world, the vast majority of people would have been Roman Catholics in the medieval era. So if you could read Latin, if you knew the biography of the saints, if you could conduct the mass, a little bit of knowledge of the ancient world, but not a whole lot, because that was seen as antithetical to the theology presented in the Bible. So something like that completely transforms this idea of identity and history in a way that anyone of African ancestry should see the relevance and value of that. And here's one of the points that I really try to emphasize. No one is saying that, well, say no one here is saying that the European or Western world didn't advance knowledge in areas of science, whether it be medicine or
sometimes it was reinventing the wheel that they just didn't realize they were reinventing it.
Well, yeah, and in some cases, like you said, it was reinventing the wheel. In other cases, it was advancing the knowledge, taking the foundations of alchemy or chemistry, and then expanding upon it. But the problem is when you have a society that won't acknowledge that at one time the Western world was under the tutelage of non-Westerners, of people from the East, be they Asians or African peoples, or both.
Well, it gets complicated. It gets real complicated.
And it doesn't have to be.
Well, okay. Well, I think it gets more complicated than most people recognize. When I say like reinventing the wheel, you got the Middle East doing so much. Oh, okay, yeah. I want to unpack so much that you said, because you said almost everything you said was amazing, and I'm right with you on it. I'll start at the beginning. All right, with North Africa and Asia having such an epicenter of knowledge and learning. If you look back at Constantinople or Istanbul, whatever you want to call it, and you look at how important that was in history, where so many things were learned and there was so much knowledge, and then you've got the Library of Alexandria, where I don't even know what we lost. They're still finding remnants around Europe and Africa and Asia where some of the stuff did survive, where not all of it burnt to the ground. And they're profound things that we ended up relearning. And then you see bizarre scenarios where the Europeans learned from the Moors and from the Middle East, especially during that that time of war in the Holy Land and stuff, where they went back and forth, and I take this and I
Insane.
steal some knowledge, and you take this and you steal, and they went back and forth, and then you go back and you look, and then there's these metholithic monuments underground where they already knew pi, which looks like 3,000 years ago. How the heck did they? How did we reinvent the wheel like three times technically? If you look back at this, so I don't even know if there's some lost history in humanity itself beyond
Yeah.
just what we know.
Now you're getting into the realm of people like Graham Hancock.
Okay.
You familiar
No,
with
yeah, I
Graham
know.
Hancock?
Yes, and that's not where I'm trying to go. Just like I'm not trying to get over religious or anything. But my point is though, it's hard to give credit to somebody when the mainstream wants a cut and dry linear. Like I said, sometimes we do this, but we
Yeah.
want it to be linear. So they want this guy learned this guy invented this, and we implemented this. And they want that real simple timeline.
Hmm.
And once it's established, maybe at a bad time where you won't be very popular or he won't be very popular. And then once it's established, you don't really want to change it. Do you know what I'm saying? They
Hmm.
just want to move on. This is linear. This is what's been said. This is what we wrote down. Let's move on now to the next thing. And then all of a sudden you find a new monolith with all these markers that prove that they knew pi 4,000 years ago or something. And you got to reevaluate. They're like, no, we're just going to throw that away. We'll just throw it away.
Yeah. Now, there is a great deal of truth to the idea that some academicians, historically speaking, have been gatekeepers, whose purpose was not really to give people the full Monty or all the information around what was going on in the past, but to kind of dole it out. I refer to it as a kind of prescribed ignorance, that we don't want to give you the full knowledge of these things because it'll completely alter uh, perhaps even our role in positions of authority. One of the classic um, uh, issues now is people talking about UFOs and ETs and everything, and all these years people made fun of folks who said they believed these things existed, and then they finally find out that the United States government in this congressional hearing actually admitted, yes, they're real. They gave them a new name. They're now called UAPs, right? Unidentified aerial phenomena. So that same thing can be applied to areas of history. The antiquity of the Sphinx, when the American Geological Society in the 90s, in fact, they had connections, I think, to Boston College through Robert Schoch, who said that the Sphinx has to be at least 10,000 years old. Well, if the Sphinx has to be at least 10,000 years old, that completely transforms the whole timeline for the antiquity of Nile Valley civilization. And that's just, of course, one example. But I mean, we could
And
go
they'll
on.
just they'll just throw that away. They'll throw it away and say that's not.
Yeah,
We're just not going to deal with it.
right,
Irrelevant if it's true. They don't even
right.
care if it's true.
And
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 and I think it's a mistake because
oh,
yeah,
it
you
is.
might lose your job or you might have to tweak your job or relearn your job. That doesn't matter to me. If you're on a journey and you're not telling the truth, you're not on your journey. You're not even
Yeah,
on your and you're stifling other people. And like I said, we're all supposed to do what we're supposed to do, or the world's not as full of a place as it's supposed to be.
yes.
And I think it's a mistake to lie or omit the truth. It's all a lie. It's all deceit in one colorful
And,
fashion or another.
and but the question we should then ask is why, right? The next question after we recognize there's deceit, always ask the follow up, which is what is the purpose for the deceit? That's why, I mean, I agree with what you just said. My focus is on truth. My focus is on truth. Prior to truth, my focus is on love. Because my focus is on love and truth, I'm going to basically tell the truth and find the truth to the best of my ability. Because of my foundation in love, I'm going to afford other people the opportunity to share their views, their insight, even if I disagree, provided there's a level of respect so that people
And
say,
a search of knowledge, and a search of knowledge. They're
right,
not doing it
exactly,
just to see if they can get a rise out
right,
of you, but they're
right,
actually legitimately trying to dig. They're
right,
looking for
respect.
something.
in civil tone, somebody having a conversation. Regan, I've got to go, my friend.
Okay. Well,
It's
I appreciate it.
what happened.
It was a great conversation. I'm not gonna lie. I wrote down so much more to go back on, and we just don't have the time. And I'll be honest with you, hour is perfect. Anyways, people don't want to listen to longer than an hour.
Well, I mean, part of what I was doing there and just dropping that information is your listeners hopefully will then be inspired to follow up on St. Maurice, to follow up on the university system and its connections to the Islamic and the Asiatic and African worlds, right? All those things that ultimately will lead for those who are seeking knowledge, right?
It opens
Right?
up a door for all kinds of stuff. Yeah, you don't
Exactly.
know what you find. You find more
Exactly.
than you think normally especially
Yeah,
when your destination is truth and love and all that stuff. It's very, very hard not to find more than what you're looking for.
that's right. And then they can take it to, they may find that they found new purpose as a result of our conversation.
There you
So,
go. And that's why I'm
all
doing
right.
this. I love it, man. Thank you very much. I
You're
appreciate your
welcome.
time.
You're welcome.
All right.
And let me know when it's gonna, go live or whatever, or send me the
In
link.
a perfect world, I'm hoping Monday.
Oh, great. Okay. All right. And good luck. So this was episode 67?
66.
66. All right. Episode 66. So I appreciate the invitation and enjoy the rest of the weekend, and I'll listen to the program once you get it up and running.
I'll send it to you in an email.
All right.
You have a
Okay.
great day.
Thanks, you too, Regan.
All
I'll
right.
see you later.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.